Hi, and welcome to the Red Tunic Podcast, a podcast where I look to rediscover what makes gaming fun and enjoyable by having positive conversations with those related to the industry. My name is Link, and today I'm joined by Tim from Blue Key Games, currently developing They Came from Dimension X. Hi, Tim. How are you doing today?
Fine enough, I guess.
Well, that's good to hear, Tim. And hopefully with it being the weekend, you can find time to relax and maybe bump it up from I guess to a definite fine.
Uh, well, I'm somewhat self-employed, so I don't get weekends right now.
Well, fingers crossed for the future for you, I suppose, is the best way to go with that then. So, Tim, before we get started, if you don't mind, maybe tell me and anyone who's listening a little bit about yourself so we just have a better idea of, who Tim is.
Um, sure. Yeah, no, so I'm Tim. I started a little dev team called Blue Key Games. Started back in 2012 was when we started using the name. And only released a couple games, but that's what happens when you're stuck in dead end jobs and retail and such. But um, recently got out of that uh, back in November last year, October, November last year, which was also when I started development on our most recent game that we're working on. They Came from Dimension X. So that's been in development since then, and I've been working full time on it since then. So that's been nice. So yeah. Other than that, other things that I do with my other partner in Blue Key Games, Chris, we do a lot of music on the side. So we got our own little band thing going on. We got a few album releases under our belt. So we're no stranger to big projects. But yeah.
And thank you for sharing that. And that's great to hear that you were able to escape some. Well, I should be careful with saying that's great to hear you were
I
able to like
switched from
escape.
one grind to another grind.
Yeah, yeah,
But
exactly. You
someone
were.
else's grind to my own grind. That's what I switched to. So it's a positive step.
Thank you. That is the way to put it because you were way ahead of me. Probably had that said to you a few times, but it's yes. I'm happy to hear that you were able to switch from dealing with someone else's what their passion project or whatever, however you want to put it, into being able to work more for what you're doing. So no,
Their year over year.
yeah, exactly, right. And also, music on the side. So, that's great to hear that, you escaped that and are, funding your own hopes and dreams, right?
Yes, yes.
So, Tim, with that in mind then, uh, do you do you mind saying like how it is you got into developing and making games? Because you said you got started, quite like 10 or so years ago at this point.
Oh, well, so that's when we started the uh Blue Key Games moniker when I started working on stuff with working on game development with Chris. And but I'd been tooling around with games way before that. When I was much, much younger, uh, my father actually programmed a simple little platformer on the computer with a level editor, and I ended up doing all of the graphics, and I think it was MS Paint. And it was just these little stick figures and things. One of them had a red hat, the other one had like a blue beanie, and just a tile-based little platformer. Naturally, not very good, but it was also way back in 1990 something or another. I don't know. I may have been like 3 feet tall or something. Um, but it didn't stop. Uh, Dealing with things. I don't know which or what came first. I remember being infatuated with Quake, but I didn't start modding until AVP came out, I believe. The first AVP, which uh as it turns out, I think I actually ended up releasing one of the first three custom maps for Aliens versus Predator back in 1999 or 2000 or something like that. Um, but yeah, it started way back then with that stuff and RPG Maker and things like that.
And
Just a
you
little
know,
rant.
yeah,
Oh,
just
I
a
was just
just a
saying,
little.
just a little ramble.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were meaning, just a little bit of experience. But
Oh no,
uh
no, I just ramble sometimes.
oh no, definitely fine. Almost encouraged even. Um but no, that's great to hear, especially I don't know how many people can confidently say something like I was one of the first X to release a custom map for a game. But that's really cool.
I
Um
might
you,
have been the second person, but I was definitely in the first like three or four, which is kind of crazy to think about looking back on because I was like, I think 12 or 13 at the time. So
yeah, that is definitely a crazy thing, especially at that age. Because I uh, I don't know much about the modding scene from that era, but I do know that around that era, beforehand for map making and such, it wasn't an easy feat. It was like, it was complicated, a headache. Um, so being able to figure that out and put something out there, that's pretty impressive, especially for 12 or 13.
well, it was actually, I honestly, I'm having a difficult time wrapping my head around how I even pulled it off when I was that young, because AVP was notoriously terrible for modding. Um, they did eventually release the source code and some level editing tools for it, but they had like a 3D Studio Max environment to model the levels, and I did not, as a 12 or 13-year-old, own a 3D Studio Max license, nor was I educated enough at the time to be pirating it. But yeah, it was definitely easier for some games rather than others. Like Quake and Half-Life had like Worldcraft, and they had um, I forget what the other ones were. There were a few for Quake, but like the big one for Half-Life, I remember being Worldcraft, which I did toy around with. But it's just funny because like the one game that I actually finished a level and released it, finished a map and released it for, was probably one of the most difficult games to finish a map and release for. Um, and yeah, so that was dumb of me. I should have started with something easier.
Well, I think starting with something hard, I don't know if that's a bad thing. 'Cause, I think it would, well, if you made it through. So I think that would at least give you the courage to say, if I could do something difficult, I can do something easier, right?
I mean, I would assume so. I don't really think like that. I just kind of my philosophy is I set a goal in mind. Like I set and I don't know if this was my philosophy back then. Maybe I was just obsessed with the game at the time or something like that, and so I just saw it through because of that. But the philosophy I've adopted now is um basically I see a goal that I'm trying to accomplish, and so then I just need to figure out, how do I get to that goal? How do I get from point A to point B? Well, sometimes there's point uh, a point A point one or A dash one or a point A dash 7 in order to get to B, but it's still a goal from A to B. Um, so and I basically just learn what I need to get to that goal. And then when I get to that goal, I set the next goal. And then if I don't already, sometimes I pick up the skills I need to get to goal C from getting to goal B, which is great. Sometimes I don't, so I just learn what I need to know to get to goal C and then the next step and step after that. And doing things that way has helped out a lot because I'm normally a really curious person, so I really like to learn a lot about the things that I'm interested in, but it doesn't really do so hot when you're trying to finish a project. So, um, so yeah, it's been really helpful to stay focused by only um, learning what I need to know about the thing that I'm trying to do, I guess, to get to that point.
And that's really interesting to like to put it all that way. And you might have kind of touched on or even started answering the next part of this question. And you know, so by all means, please elaborate as necessary, I guess. But based on the experiences that you've had with making games and learning as you go and what have you, um, do you have any advice for those that might also want to get into the industry?
Well, I would say that I'm not really in the industry per se. I'm more industry adjacent at best, in my opinion. But maybe everyone feels that way. Imposter syndrome, all that stuff. Um, but really, the best thing that anyone who's trying to get started with game development would be just start making the game. Um, Make sure you don't overscope. That's probably going to be your biggest enemy. Um, if you're trying to develop the skills and such, creating fan games or just recreating other game mechanics is a really great way to go. Modding can help out. Like I've learned a lot about uh, learned a lot of techniques and just workflows and things like that just by studying things like the Quake C code and the Quake code itself for um, just looking at uh, the way that studying the way other games are designed and things like that. But yeah, so uh, I guess the two big things are uh, try to recreate stuff that you know, um, and also uh, just do it. Um, those two things are going to basically, it's that goals uh, goals based approach, right? That I was just talking about. If you set a goal, don't think about all the adjacent stuff to that goal. Think about what your direct path to that goal is going to be. Sometimes you are going to be have to hit other requirements. So, okay, well, you've got goal A, you've got point A, you're trying to get point B, but you have to stop by point C first in order to be able to go back and go to point B because point B itself might require stuff from both points A and C or something like that. But it's still your ultimate goal is to get to B. And so you just learn, uh, do everything that you need to just get from that one point to the other point. And yeah, you'll basically, in my experience, you'll get the most progress out of that, the most bang for your buck out of that approach.
And thank you, because that is really good advice to have like the goals based approach. And it almost sounds kind of in the same way, maybe adjacent or what have you, but it almost sounds like also focusing on compartmentalizing each thing that you need to do, because instead of uh, instead of worrying about um, having to have make your character walk and then run and then jump and then climb or what have you. Focus on making them walk and then run. And then, like, if you take each task as its own, and I might be stretching this or reaching a little too far, and I apologize if I am, but it sounds like kind of like, if you break it down into the core components or the core things that you're aiming to do, after you have everything lined up or done, you'll have a package of things that are doing everything you need, but because you didn't stress about, well, how do I make them climb before you make them walk, you've made it easier on yourself. By all means, correct me if I took that in the
No,
wrong
no, that's
direction.
that's for the most part pretty accurate. It is that is uh, like there it's well, so it's pretty accurate insofar as okay, I want a character that can I want a character that can climb, right? Um okay, so what do I need to have in order to get that character to climb? Well, first, they've got to be able to walk to the where they want to climb, right? If they're in the middle of a field or something like that, and there's a rock wall that you want to climb, well, your characters needs to be able to move from the middle of the field to the rock wall. So you got to figure out how to make them walk. But then you got to think about, well, if they can't just be walking all the time. I mean, they can, but in this game, you don't want them walking all of the time. You want them to only walk when you make them walk, right? So then you've got to make sure that that character knows how to stand. So you got to figure out how to make that character to just stand still before you can make them walk. And so that you pretty much built your path right there. So the first thing I'm going to do is, uh, and naturally, before even that, you got to make sure, okay, well, I can make them, if I make them, in order to make them even be able to stand, I need to make sure that they even exist in the world. So there's your path. You've got, first, I've got to get, that character in the world somehow. And then when I get them in the world, I got to make sure that they can just stand around, and then I got to make sure that they can take input to be able to move, and then I got to make them be able to move, and then I got to make them be able to climb. But it's like there's a you suddenly if it's that sort of what is it, deductive reasoning. That it's Sherlock Holmes style, right?
Yes.
Um, and so you figure out your goal, your ultimate goal, and then you just uh, if you work your way backwards uh, to what you need to accomplish with it. So um, yeah, so it kind of is, it is like that in a way where it is compartmentalizing. It's the real trick, I guess, would be figuring out the separation of the features. What actually counts as a separate feature, what doesn't, what's really just the same feature, but, modified. So, like in Dimension X's case, you know, I want my character to be able to walk on walls. Well, first I got to get them to be able to walk. But then you realize, okay, well, walking on walls is just walking. So what's the difference from them being able to walk on the floor and walk on the wall? Well, it's gravity, right? So we got to figure out how do we get their new gravity and such. And so um, you work around that way where you identify, okay, walking on walls is actually just the same thing as walking. That's not what's different in those cases. The walking isn't different. So when I create my walk function, I don't have to create a walk on walls function. I already created the walk function. So what's the function that gets you to walk on walls? Well, it's gravity. You're pushing them down against a surface. So how do I figure out, where gravity should be pushing them down? Well, then you're like, okay, well, if they're on the ground, you've got a surface normal from the collision. So the opposite direction of the normal is going to be where you want to push them towards. So bam, then you're like, okay, well, that's how I figure out how to change, like what the gravity should be is okay, well, surface normals, things like that. So it's just yeah.
Yes, and thank you for expanding on that. That's a good way to look at it. I think for especially for people that can get into their own heads, hearing how to kind of start with what you want and work your way back is a fantastic way to go. It's something that I think I and many other people probably should work with more just to keep themselves moving forward in a better way without panicking or feeling overwhelmed. Now, you got ahead of me, and by that I mean I wanted to ask about this later on or bring it up later on, but now is as good a time as ever, I think. In the case for they came from Dimension X, the walking on the walls, the your game itself that you're working on. I did want to touch on it about how, I played the demo, how absolutely wild and fantastic it felt, um, and how you managed to make everything feel, and I don't mean this in a negative way. I think it's speaking to the atmosphere. It's speaking completely to the atmosphere, and I think this is, probably well intended, that you managed to make everything feel alien and foreign. Like uncomfortably alien and uncomfortably foreign. And obviously there's Quake. What I'm presuming there's Quake or Quake-like influences in there and such. But the walking on the walls mechanic was, I saw it in the trailer. I didn't know how it was going to feel. I didn't know how it was going to work, and it's absolutely bananas well how smooth that transition is. Obviously there's some locations where it's just, up the wall you go, and there's somewhere, you have to take a certain path to to get there. But I have only played one other game myself, and it wasn't even a game, it was a mod, but I've only played one other like game where it was fluid or smooth like that, where you just kept walking like down a hallway, and the next thing you know, at the end of the hallway, you're looking down at where you came from, and it was actually a mod for the first Deus Ex game. And at the time everyone was trying to figure out how, because it was just bananas that they did it. And playing the demo, running up the wall, shooting at enemies, and having such smooth, fluid transitions between um, where what way's up and what way's down, I think is the best way to put it. Having such fluid transitions from the enemy being down, just going there was absolutely fantastic, and it blew my mind. And I just wanted to talk, more about your game, more about where some of those influences might have came from, and um, why why might not be the right word, but the reasoning that you wanted to make it so that it was this gravity defying experience. I hope what I just said wasn't a lot of just words that made no sense, or was just vague.
Why does this game exist?
In the best way possible is, I think, is
I,
we can summarize it
yeah,
as.
yeah. No, it's why does this exist? Actually, I'm gonna hopefully get people asking that about some of the things they'll encounter in it. Um, Actually, you know what? It's funny that you say that kind of stuff about it, where it's like it's kind of a trip. Like, how did this happen? Like, how am I here? Because in my opinion, like the demo itself, it was actually intended to be a vertical slice demo for pitching to publishers and things. Um, and I just decided, you know what? Why not release? The game is playable enough and polished enough. Why not just release it as the demo? Um, which, by the way, oh, sorry. uh, if you wanted to play more of it, there's actually three other levels on the demo. They're just hidden behind debug commands, console commands. So, yeah, there's that. Uh, the Yep, it's just you pull down the console, and you can start the three maps with map E1 M1. If you want to if you want to experience some kind of trippy stuff, it's actually a bit trippier in the other maps. Um, like there's this section in E1 M1 where you're sneaking around, and you end up going through this air duct. So you already went up. You already go up like uh, this shuttle loop. My own little Sonic reference there. There's a shuttle loop in the start of the first level of the game. Uh, but you're going through generally what seems like a standard kind of creepy base with these guys in there, You sneak through an air duct into another room. You sneak around this guy. He starts shooting at you, and you go into another air duct. And as you go through the air duct, it doesn't feel like you're going up a wall or anything like that. It doesn't feel like you're changing things around. It just feels like you're going through an air duct. At least that's what it felt like, feels like to me. But you go through this air duct for a hot minute, and you hear yourself, banging around in the air duct, and then you get out of the air duct, and you're on a wall looking down at the floor, and that I think that moment is one of my favorite moments that we've done with the game so far. Is it seems like you're going through a normal duct route, and you don't really, it doesn't feel like you're traveling up the wall because of your space being restricted, your vision being kind of restricted because it's a tight air duct. And it's only once you get out of the air duct that it's just like, whoa. And the neat thing is it's a box room, just with a whole bunch of overturned beds that are on the floor of the room, but you're on the wall, so you you use the beds to actually get off of the wall and back onto the floor. Um, so it's neat stuff like that. But that is all being evasive on the actual question you asked. Is where did this idea come from? I guess is kind of the summation of your question. Um, so a lot of people have been calling it Quake but Fear, or this totally reminds me of Fear, and that's actually kind of flattering to be compared to that. Uh, but also, I've said this before in other places, but I've never actually played Prey. I'm not Fear, but Prey, right? Rather, I keep saying Fear. I love Fear. I want to do some stuff that Fear does. Uh, but yeah, Prey. They keep calling it Prey 2006, like Quake but Prey. And it's really cool. Like I've seen some clips and playthroughs of some parts of Prey and such. And I really want to play it, but I've never played it. And uh, so when everyone's saying that it's inspired by Prey, it actually isn't. Although funny enough, you're familiar with the gravity grenade launcher in the game, right?
Um,
Uh,
in
in
I've never actually
Dimension
played
X,
Prey. Oh,
in
yes, yeah, yeah, the grenade launcher. Yes, yes.
yeah, bouncing around. Uh, Fun fact: apparently Tom Hall had come up with an idea about bouncing grenades that, like, you'd throw them at a wall and they'd bounce up the wall and onto the ceiling, things like that. Was one of his ideas for uh, Prey 2006. I only heard about it in a talk after I implemented the gravity grenade launcher. So then I had uh, that Leo GIF meme, the Leo meme pointing at the TV. I had that moment where I was
Oh,
like, "That's the thing I did." Um, so that's cool. But yeah, so it's actually not inspired by Prey, and it also doesn't work like Prey, the gravity mechanics. The It's actually um, it was really inspired not by any particular game mechanic. It was just I'd been watching, like, I'd been playing a lot of Quake Champions, and getting really into watching, like, keeping up with the QPL, not all of the different tournaments and things that they had, but the Quake Pro League itself. And I can't remember if I was at work or if I was in the middle of a match, or just like thinking about it obsessively like I normally do. But I was just thinking of how cool it would be if like you're playing a death match, right? And uh, you're on the ground, but your opponent is on the ceiling, and so you have to shoot up at your opponent. But then, like, that thought kind of continued, where it's like, well, if you're in death match, you know, yeah, the opponent is on what looks like your ceiling, but your opponent is looking at you like you're on their ceiling. And I'm just like thinking about that, and uh, just how cool of an idea that would be. So naturally, I didn't make a multiplayer game. I only made a single player game, right? um, but yeah, so that's pretty much where the idea germed from. And so then like I was like, okay, well, I've got my idea, which is funny because uh, my writer for the RPG game we had done, um, he was asking me, he's telling me, Tim, you're like Quake is like your favorite game. Why? It might be. It's up there for me. I've got a lot of favorite games. Everyone does, right? But he's just like, why haven't you ever made a first-person shooter? And I'm just like, I didn't have any neat ideas. Everything's been done, right? And then I got this neat idea. So now we're, 10 months later, we're here. So, um, but yeah, so it stems from just a dumb idea I had thinking about Quake, and then I expanded on those ideas with inspiration from the Aliens versus Predator games. Take your pick. I love all of them. AVP 1, 2, 3, all of them great. And also the Super Mario Galaxy games, which are my favorite Mario platformers, particularly Mario Galaxy 2, which is pretty much the first one, but better. Um, but yeah, so that's pretty much where the game comes from is that stuff there. So,
And thank you for sharing that. And that's really wild how how it started as just like if I may put it this way, like an idle daydream kind of thing. Because I think everyone has played a game. They're like, oh, it'd be real cool if a game did this, or oh, yeah, it'd be great if this, and they
yeah,
have these wild ideas, and then
those
you
are the
had
best games.
and then, yes, in your brain they are, right? And then you had that wild idea and went, I can do this. And then you started doing it. And it's, like I said, it's absolutely wild just how fluid and smooth it felt. And like I said, I was compelled to ask about it. That specifically, the rest of the game, it feels like it's a eldritch horror kind of thing, which is, anyone, I think a lot of people are going to enjoy something like that. But it was and I don't mean this in a rude way, but for me it was the sheer audacity of having a uh, gravity defying experience where the focus wasn't something like certain areas that you can walk on the wall. What I mean by that, like magnetic things where there's like an actual transition period, or the like where some games do it, where it's you're a jetpack and it's 0G or what have you, and you jetpack off and then you align yourself to the floor and blah blah blah, right? Um, and this is very different to all of that, and that's I wanted to specifically talk about that just because it was in playing it and everything. It was like I said, it was so smooth, so just it felt real good, and I just needed to know how and why that came to be.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so it's funny because you're bringing up the magnetic floors thing. That was one of the first things that I decided against was magnetic floors. I didn't want it to be like a specific sections of the level or whatever, or like you see a special wall and it goes up. It seems like that in the demo, like that's what's going on, and that's not at all what's going on. The funny thing is, walls that you cannot gain the gravity gain a new gravity from are actually exceptions in the game. Uh, they're not the rule. They're the exceptions. Basically, as long as your angle is low enough, you can transfer to that new normal. You can transfer your gravity over to that floor. So as long as you can just walk smoothly onto it, um, it's something like it's actually something like as long as it's less than 58 degrees or something like that. So it's actually a little bit steep what you can transfer onto. Um, then you can transfer to it, and that's something that I worked to figure out uh, really early on, like at the game's inception, because um, like it's so one of the neat things that Nintendo does is they will take an idea, they will take a design idea, and then they will revolve. Um, Sometimes they'll revolve just a level around that idea, but the entire level is like that they do everything they can with that idea. Sometimes they'll take an idea, uh, turn it into a game mechanic, and revolve the entire game around it. Like in Mario Sunshine, he's got uh, Flood, and so the entire game is designed around you using Flood in one way or another. Or in Mario Galaxy, it's obviously the gravity mechanic, and so every stage is designed around that gravity mechanic. And so with Dimension X, it's just like, okay, well, it's a gravity game, but it's also a shooter game. So I want to make sure that pretty much everything in this game revolves around gravity in some sort of way, or and that it's accounted for in some way or another. That it's not just like, okay, well, you're on the ground for a while and just shooting it's just like a normal shooter or whatever. But you change walls sometimes. But then like, okay, well, you're now it's just another floor or whatever. I didn't want to do it that way. Instead, I wanted you to think about the room that you're in. So it's actually intended to be kind of a puzzle platformer in some senses as well. Um, because when you're off the ground, you don't change your gravity. So when you jump, you're jumping from one floor. You don't change your gravity when you're jumping. But yeah, so I wanted the gravity mechanic to be central, and so there are enemies that all of the enemies, they can change their gravity direction. They can walk in all the same places that you walk. There are enemies that float that will rotate their gravity to match where you're standing. There are enemies that will hit you and you'll change your gravity, like you'll be knocked into. It's actually in the trailer. There's this giant who just punches you so hard that you get launched into a new gravity direction, and he'll chase after you too. So uh, the elder things that are in the demo, the winged aliens, uh, if they'll try to uh, get close to basically wherever you're standing, even if they're on like the ceiling, you're on the floor. They'll try to line themselves up with you, and then they'll adjust their gravity to match yours if you try to evade them because they're melee creatures and they want to get in close. And then there's other creatures that will just crawl along all the walls no matter where they are, and makes it kind of chaotic, like the Shoggoth or the Mars dog. So those all revolve around gravity, the enemies. And then the weapons themselves, um, largely, uh, the weapons, they all have different hooks to them. There have been a few complaints about the game where it feels like enemies are bullet sponges. It feels like you're not dealing a lot of damage. The truth is, the first pistol you get in the game can explode the Shoggoth mini boss at the end of the demo in one shot. um, because but you have to work the angles with those weapons. So the pistol you shoot ricochets off the wall. Every ricochet doubles its damage as it ricochets, and you can get it to ricochet up to like 8 or 9 times. Um, so it just blows up anything it touches at that point. Um, and then there's the gravity grenade launcher where the grenades themselves will bounce along the walls and ceilings and things. Um, there's a rocket launcher that you can drop the rocket in any direction that you want. So you can change its direction to a specific direction after you launch it. There's a lightning gun that bounces off walls, does more damage, things like that. A lot of cool stuff. There's gonna be a gun that will let you change an enemy's gravity either to a specific one. For like primary fire, you'd be able to select the enemy and select the direction you want them to fall in, or you can just instantly set them to a random direction for the alt fire is the plan for it. So that'll be neat. But yeah, so Nintendo philosophy: pick a game mechanic and revolve your entire game around it, and it'll feel that much more thematically stronger. Um, so
And I think that's a wonderful idea because, like I said, like I've said several times, it felt fantastic, and I, if that's the philosophy that is the mechanic that everything's going to revolve around, and I look forward to it because when I was playing last night, because I tried the demo, I was like, oh, I want to go in fresh for this. Um, the trying the demo was it took a it I wasn't committed by the end to be thinking of it in terms of a 3D space. I'll say that as opposed to 2D being like single platform.
yep,
Um,
yep.
um, but I hadn't commit to it, and by the end of it I still hadn't, just because it's such a different style of gameplay. But it was so interesting to when I was doing it. It was just the trying to track the enemy, and oh, now I'm looking down at them, or now I'm looking like off the wall at them. And I look forward to what more the game brings, more what you do, because from the other weapons that you described and all of that, it sounds like it's going to be a very unique experience that I hope finds you success, because uh, you know like I said, I've never seen anything like this in the same kind of fluidity of it. And I hope that I hope that you get recognized for just how well it seems to work, because it's fantastic, and I think you deserve to be rewarded for just how fantastic the demo plays. And from the sounds of it, it's not just the demo that's going to be fantastic, but like the rest of everything is going to keep that methodology. And I hope you find success with it. If
Me too. Um, and the another thing that I was just thinking about was uh, I'm gonna I've already got uh, modding support added for the game now. I've been doing a rewrite of the game in uh, C++ GD native because some folks have been having performance issues and things, so I'm trying to make it better for them. But while doing that, I found ways to better support modding, specifically things like custom maps and things. So I'll be releasing um, some type of setup for people to be able to make custom maps uh, through Trench Broom. It's I don't know if you're familiar with Trench Broom. You heard of it?
I've heard of it. I've seen other people talking about it.
Yeah, it's primarily used with Quake mapping, um, but uh, I it's the editor that I use for Dimension X's mapping. It's basically Trench Broom to a Godot add-on called Codot or Godot, however you want to pronounce it. A lot of people call it Codot. It's probably Godot is probably the best way to pronounce it. It's for Godot, for the Godot engine. But yeah, it'd be a Trench Broom Godot. Can't pronounce it. Oh, there it is. There it is.
No worries.
Uh, um, and the to the Godot engine. Um, and so I'm kind of looking forward to that. It'll load up. It'll recognize map paths and it'll recognize music paths and sound paths. The game. So um, yeah, there will be it should be pretty flexible for people to do a lot of cool stuff with it. So I'm pretty excited for that. Um, yeah, yeah. No, I'm just super excited for that actually.
Well, I like I said, I hope it finds success. Like it it in my mind it deserves to find success, and it seems like already, just by the very nature of you trying to make it run good, run well, that you're already thinking of other things that are going to exist just by the nature of, coincidental happenstance, which is also fantastic. So, like I said, I wish for the best for it. Um, Now, Tim, not to say I'm not interested in more of the game. However, if you'll permit it, I would like to ask a few, to maybe change the topic a little, ask a few other questions.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
So, Tim, before we started recording, there was, you did kind of express interest in a vague direction, and I can't remember the exact words that you did use for that vague direction. However, I'm gonna try and I think this is a fair question to ask given the direction where it was going. But has there been a favorite trend of yours in gaming over the last few years? And if there was, what was it, or what kind of trend would you like to see more of? Maybe the better way to phrase that.
Um, Honestly, yeah, I don't know really. The I like the what the indie space is doing just in general. I know that's also super vague, but uh it's uh I'd say almost all of the most exciting stuff is coming from the indie space for sure. Um if you were to ask me to point out specific things, uh one I could not tell you because, head empty. But two, there's a lot, honestly. There's just a lot. There's and the really nice thing is that the tools are now mature enough, especially the open source tools and such, but um even just some of the pseudo free to use tools, like Unity and Unreal, but also the open source tools like Godot and Blender and things like that, that are just they've matured to the point where a lot of people who couldn't get, like, a lot of artists and writers and things like that who used to need a big team to do stuff, they can now just get into it. Like me, I don't consider myself a programmer, to be honest. I consider myself a game designer who just happens to be forced to program, is what I consider myself. So like I have never actually done anything significant of any significance really in C++ plus plus until, what was it? 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago? I think it was 3 weeks ago. Um, Before that, my experience was with extensive GD script stuff, um, some light JavaScript stuff that I did years and years ago for Construct, although I didn't really get what I was doing. Um, but yeah, like the ACE system in Construct, that was probably like Construct and Construct 2 were the big leaps for me in learning how game design logic really worked. Like I had toyed around with RPG Maker and such before Construct because I wanted to make a game soundtrack, but in order to make a game soundtrack, you needed to make a game. So, um, and but yeah, going from that stuff and going to Godot and everything like that. But I'd never really touched C++ plus plus until a few weeks ago, and I'm just like rolling with it. I've almost got the whole game re converted over, which is nice. Um, but it's just like the tools are just ready and available now. And the older tools that were there too. Also, until October of last year, I'd never made a 3D game before. never made a first person shooter. I learned all this stuff uh, starting in October when I was running my first experiments. Before that, I had done some light forays into 3D while working on an RPG game, but that RPG game was also just mostly a 2D game that I was trying to do some 3D stuff in. But I didn't start 3D proper until October, and that's also when I first started um, actually learning Blender was maybe earlier that year for some of my RPG experiments. So I didn't start modeling and like learning how to model until last year, and it shows. um, I laugh at my own jokes. But yeah, so but that's really exciting to me because it's like, I don't consider myself special in that sense. I consider myself to be pretty average in that sense, which means that there's a lot of other people that are really capable of doing that too, where the tools are mature enough that they make it really easy to just start making what you want to make. So you're getting a lot of people's dream projects that are like super niche, but like it was that niche stuff before, way back in, the 80s and early 90s and things like that. Um, and even going before that too, I'm sure. But that like created the genres we were all into. Um, like I don't, so it's just super exciting because you can get small groups of people doing amazing things. So that is my long-winded answer to that question of what is my what trends what's the trend that I find most exciting that that's my favorite is just access. It's access to to being able to make the things that like people having access to make the things that they want to make. So
Y- that's a wonderful way to put it. And I definitely understand where you're coming from with that. As being someone that, for the longest time, my friends would look at a game, and they were always going to be like indie games, and they would look at games, and it would be, well, that's going to be a Link game, and that was mainly because it was a very very indie game where they were just experimenting and doing something that may or may not have had, it was niche, this exactly you said, it had a niche appeal, niche market, neat, what have you, right? And now, the indie scene, it's been a good 10 years since that exploded. And the scene is, the tools are being more available, and I think I agree, I understand what you're saying, and like I also think that's a fantastic trend to be able to look at the horizon, and to just see all these tools that are being put in people's hands, younger people's hands as well. Now, some schools are offering courses, like high schools or what have you are offering, courses with some of these tools that make it so easy. Um, and the horizon, I think, is full of fantastic, it's I really pin myself with a weird analogy there. I think there is a lot of ships on the horizon, and I look forward to it. And it's like you said, it's mainly because of the tools that are now easily and readily available. And yeah, so that's I thank you for that mindset, because that's, like I said, I never thought of it that way before, putting it that way, but it works, and it's great, and I think a lot of people would probably agree. So, Tim, I'm going to shift it a little bit away from games if you're okay with that.
sure.
And I am curious, you touched on the music, so, by all means, if that's where we go with it, that's where we go with it. But outside of, playing or making games, what other hobbies do you have and enjoy?
Um, well, I mean, it's like you said, I'm as far as, or like I said earlier, I guess like you said that I said earlier. I'm I've been a musician for I don't know, I guess since 2013 at this point. No, earlier than that, 2003. That's what it was. Yep. God dang. Yeah, so uh been a musician for uh roughly 20 years now. And I've been uh doing music with Chris since uh for almost as long actually. Since about 2005, I think. It was either 2005 or 2006 that we started doing music together. Um, and we released our first full-on album, I think in 2010. Yeah, 2010. And then we released an album uh, every for released an album in 2011 and one in 2012. We're actually working on a fourth major release um, that we just put some music out from. But it's taken a bit of a backseat to the Dimension X stuff, obviously, naturally. Um, but yeah, no, it's one of the I just like to entertain people. Is my biggest thing. Is I'm an entertainer at heart. So, um, I find music is kind of the easiest way to do that in a sense. To reach people basically. Um, so and it's something that I've gotten a lot. Like I still see improvements on it the more I do it and over the years and stuff, and looking back on it, um, and it all just comes from repetition really. Like must have written like I think it's like over 400 sets of lyrics, turned like 200 of those into songs, and then I think we've recorded like maybe half of that, like 100 tracks or something like that. Um, I could be off though with my estimates by now. I probably am off. It's probably way higher than that now because I think those estimates are from like 10 years ago.
Well,
But
yeah, I imagine if you'd been working on it for years, it'll just keep growing. And that's an interesting, side thing, and I imagine it would go well with, when you're making or designing a game up to also be able to look at it and I'm not a musically inclined person. I can't read, I can't write, can't play anything. So that's a real foreign thing for me. So I'm I don't know if this is normally how it would work, but I would like to imagine that it would probably be easier for you when you're like designing a level out. You have the music, you have like the theme, the feel, the what have you, also being able to go along with it um to help push forward on knowing if you're in the right direction or not. I don't know if what I just said is absolute nonsense, and I apologize if it
oh,
was.
that's probably some people's methods and things like that. I don't really work on the maps in that way per se. I mean, there's like you could argue there's a rhythm to like an intrinsic rhythm to things and such, um, but that comes from a more basic, like not necessarily a music thing, but a more basic emotional uh, cadence, um, an emotional push and pull and rest and uh, rest and press. So like like in the demo, there's the part where it's just after the machine gunner, the Reaper. Yeah, the guy with the machine gun that fires all those blue shots. He's the Reaper. Um, After you get past him, uh, there's it's the first encounter with the Elder Thing, um, and you basically go into the room. Like you go through a portal, you go into a room, and there's body parts everywhere. And so then you go into the next hallway. There's an axe. You grab the axe, and the door opens, and you just see this thing standing there, and it's not moving, but it's just standing there. And so naturally, you go to approach it because uh, you know it's the next leg. You've only got the way forward, and then when you approach it, it just spins around and its wings spread and everything, and it's just like this uh, boo moment or whatever. It's not terribly distressing. What's more distressing is the fact that it moves like you don't have a lot of space. It moves really fast, and so you're just under pressure, and you can go back into the other room. Most people do, and like you just kind of kite it a bit as much as you can. And it's not terrible. You can get into a rhythm. It's just like initially distressing or whatever, and initially tense, and then but you just got some armor. You just got your health refilled, so it's not terrible. You can take some swing. You can take some hits and stuff, uh, and you'll probably come out on top. And so yeah, you get that little victory, but in your panic, you're shooting directly at it. It's like, okay, well, you're understanding this thing can take a beating. It can take a beating. It's definitely a tough enemy. Um, but yeah, so you kill it, and it's like, okay, the door is unlocked, and you're like, okay, tough, hard fought battle, but whatever. And so you have that little lull and everything, and you go around the corner, and the door itself takes a moment to open, and that's intentional because I wanted you to stop uh, when you hit the door trigger. I wanted you to get stopped by the door because when the door opens, you're in the dark and you just see all of those red eyes from the just a whole room filled with them, and that gets most people to just stop. Like most people I've seen play it or had talked about it have mentioned that room, and so it's a nice sort of like moment where you get the player to stop, and it's a resting moment, but it's a resting moment of dread, and so you just have you can kind of control pacing in some neat ways just with some neat design. Uh, So yeah, I don't know. So just going back to it's like I don't consider it a music thing, but there is definitely a rhythm that you can develop when designing it that really brings out the most in a player's emotions. Um, that music is adjacent to, that music also uses, but it's just more primal than that. So
And yeah, I understand what you're saying. And something you said that I really like the way you said it. And for me, I've always described it as like downtime or as like giving the player or giving yourself a moment to breathe. I was about to say the player, but I'm the player in like 100%
yep,
of these
yep.
occurrences. But the way you put it, I liked, and it was rest and press. And I think that's a really apt way to say it. That is a little less floaty or a little less vague, because if you say, "Oh, I need a downtime or time to breathe," in context for different games, that doesn't always mean the same thing. Like, for example, in like a Far Cry game, time to breathe to one person can mean like a brief moment between the minute to minute where they're just dumping 20 more enemies on top of you. To someone else like myself, time to breathe means or downtime means well, I'd really like to just be able to walk out and throw the fish hook into the water without being mauled by a bear and then have like 20 enemies show up or what have you. And I think rest and press is a much better way to describe that because it's contextually it's always going to mean the same thing, right? That you have the moment of rest before you're pressed. I don't know, like there's really has nowhere to go with this in terms of everything else. I just wanted to mention that I like that phrase that you said, and I'm going to steal it for myself because it works far
By all
better.
means, by all means, steal away.
Now, Tim, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I know how you said that you really don't get time off because it's you're on your own grind for your own thing right now. However, it is Friday. I do want to let you go, and I do hope that you can relax a little. Today is the first day of Realms Deep. Speaking of indie, hopefully maybe some of your downtime can be to look at what other indie devs are doing, or
Yeah,
whatever else
just
you might do.
did you were you able to catch the presentation earlier today?
I watched. I want to say I was able to jump in on it probably a third of the way through. Um, Now, if that was a question of did I see anything I liked, the answer is yes. Do I remember the names of those things? The answer is no.
Yeah, I kind of had a day like that too today, where I did catch it and I did like a lot of things in there, um, and it's just like it's escaping me now what I was watching, but I was also trying to work and just so but yeah, a lot of cool stuff. I'm gonna have to catch the restream of that, just check out all the things that they were showing off. Um,
And yeah, definitely, that's also kind of exactly why I'm saying, hopefully you can find some time to relax tonight, or over the weekend or what have you. That was just a solid event that's happening, that you could look into that, just based on the rest of the conversation, but, or just whatever else it is that you enjoy doing. Like you know, I'm, I have went through periods of, very packed schedules and stressful times for my own work, and having the work life balance and all of that. And I can say firsthand, as I'm sure everyone else can, that that's hell. And you know um I just just hope that you can find some downtime to some your own rest and press, if you will. That has weird connotations anyway. I hope that you can have your own time to breathe, is really what I'm trying to get at.
you hope that I can have time to play Gloomwood.
Uh, yeah, definitely. If that is up your alley and what you're looking forward to doing, definitely, I would encourage that. I've tried to get several people to try that game, and one of them, just as a weird tangent, one of them being my father, who felt the need to post to social media with very little context. I found the gun. He. Sorry, just it came into my head when you mentioned Gloomwood. Um,
I
um,
found the gun.
yeah, basically, yes, and even with context of knowing what he was doing, it makes no sense. But, if that's what you choose to relax with, by all means, I hope you can find time to unwind. Basically, just because if especially from everything else you've said about how it sounds like it's been a very packed couple of months. Just give yourself some time to relax, and it's I hope for the best for you, because like I said, I don't know your personal setup. I just know that having things running, kind of full tilt all the time, is exhausting. And I don't, no one needs to be, no one hopefully needs to be exhausted all the time. You know?
Well, I appreciate that. I do take care of myself. I do work a lot, but it's one of those things where I'm passionate about the work, and the work is, like I said earlier, it's not someone else's year over year that I'm doing the work for. I'm doing the work that I'm doing, I will see the direct benefits from. So there's that. So it's a little bit different than, you know, a studio crunch type deal. Um, uh, it's purely for me, and it's mostly a self-directed crunch just to kind of get the game converted over, so that I can actually continue to work at a more reasonable pace. So yeah, no, it's probably only going to be for like another week or so for this hardcore working on it, and then I'll get back to a regular schedule. So, but I do appreciate the concern. I do appreciate the concern over your father finding a gun in Gloomwood. Uh, but yes, for all of you who are listening, play Gloomwood. It's great.
Um,
And play Dimension X, I guess. Am I supposed to plug my game?
well, we've talked about it. I would hope anyone that would want to play it caught the plug. But yes, in a very explicit term, yes, they should definitely be playing your game. They came from Dimension X. The demo is out. And, speaking of that, you kind of got ahead of me, which is perfectly fine. But I was going to say, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. But if there was anything else you wanted to talk about, any plugs you wanted to, to make, like your own game to play, they came from Dimension X, or, Gloomwood because you're enjoying Gloomwood. Or if there
I
was,
wouldn't say I'm enjoying Gloomwood yet. I enjoyed the demo for Gloomwood. I have not gotten to play the early access of Gloomwood. I bought it, but I've just been working too much. So, everyone it's like that Simpsons episode where everyone's outside playing Gloomwood and I'm inside trying to pass the final or something. You know, that's that
yes.
where Bart's inside trying to finish his C++ conversion. That's how that episode goes. Um, but yeah, no, I really wanna dig into that. There's a lot I want to dig into though. Like,
um,
uh, uh,
understandable, and that. Oh.
play Dimension X. It's they came from Dimension X. It's available on itch.io and on Steam. The demo's free. You can play it all you want. Feel free to wishlist it. And yeah, good luck, explorers.
um, as well as those, which I'll be including those in the episode description for you. I want to make it easier or help make it easier for anyone to follow and find. Where else can people follow you and learn a little bit more about you?
So there's the Blue Key Games Twitter is where I am most active. You'll find me just posting about all the little dev stuff that I'm doing and the typically game adjacent stuff. So if you're interested in that, interested in seeing how the sausage is made, show you the whole sauce. No, wait, that's
Anyway,
where's that?
moving on.
Um, I stole that joke. I stole that joke. Uh, from the Double Fine guy. Why can't I remember his name? Ah, that's so disrespectful. No hate. No hate. But yeah, so if you're interested in seeing some behind the scenes stuff, I also just posted all of the cheats that you can use in Dimension X. Hopefully that'll get buried because I didn't put any identifying tags or identifying words in it, so you probably won't be able to search for it when I tweet like 500 more times. There's also a YouTube channel, the Blue Key Games YouTube channel, less frequently updated, but still has a lot of neat stuff. I'll post some of the things. I post everything that I post on YouTube onto Twitter as well. But if you prefer to just like see some of the more concrete stuff, you can check out the YouTube. And Yeah, I mean, there's the Blue Key Games Discord that just recently opened up. I don't really advertise it, so it's not super bumping in there. But if you ever want to reach out to me, ask me any questions or anything like that about the game, or even there's even a little feedback area. Uh, by all means, feel free to join the Discord and give me a shout out. But just don't at me, bro. I'll see it if you post in there. I'll see it. You don't have to at me or anyone else. We do check out when people actually chat in there, so we're always watching. So yeah, but those are the main places where you can find me or updates on the game.
Awesome, awesome. And I will be sure to include, those links in the description for people to be able to join, follow, what have you. And Tim, if there wasn't anything else that you wanted to discuss or what have you, I'll let you get on with your evening. Let you hopefully find some downtime to check out Realms Deep, or maybe finally get to playing the early access to Gloomwood.
One last plug: Play Quake Champions.
I have no follow-up for that. Sorry. Um,
Don't need
uh,
one. Don't need one. I just need that to just play Quake Champions. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
fair enough. So, Tim, if there wasn't anything else, I will let you get on with the evening, though.
All right. Well, hey, you have a good night.
You as well. And thanks again, Tim, for making time to have this conversation with me. And thank you for joining us on the Red Tunic podcast, as well as a special thanks to Ronald Jenkins for the use of the music from the title track from Roads Deep. And if you like this podcast and want to support it and help it grow, please subscribe or follow me on Twitter at Red Tunic Podcast to receive the latest episodes and news. Be sure to share it with those you think might also enjoy it. Thanks. Until next time.